The Royals and Yankees are all tied up at one game apiece, and now they head back to Kansas City. Let's talk about it all next on Locked On Royals.
You are Locked On Royals, your daily Kansas City Royals podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
You are tuned into Locked On Royals and the Locked On Podcast Network. I am your host, Jack Johnson, and you can find me on Twitter or X at JohnnyJ_15. That's at JOHNYJ_15. You also can catch us on wherever you get your podcast. That can be Spotify, Apple Podcast, Amazon Music, Google Podcast. We're on Odyssey and YouTube. Just be sure to hit that follow button and subscribe. If you're a first-time listener and you want to know a little bit more about me and this show, I am based here in Kansas City. I work at Sports Radio 810 WHB, doing some hosting, some co-hosting, and a little bit of producing as well. But when it comes to this podcast, when you click on this link, you know that you're going to be getting 30 straight minutes of Royals baseball. Today's show is brought to you by Booking.com. Booking.yeah, the right stay can make you a fan of any city, even your rivals. Book today on Booking.com, the official accommodation partner of Major League Baseball. Get the Booking.com app today. Well, last night might have been one of the greatest sports nights in history right here in Kansas City. And I mean that for the city, not overall, of course, across America, but just specifically for Kansas City. I don't know how it gets any better than the Royals winning a playoff game in Yankee Stadium, nonetheless, and the Kansas City Chiefs beating the New Orleans Saints on Monday Night Football to move to a perfect 5-0 heading into the bye week. I got a Royals hat on today. I got a Chiefs shirt on, so I'm repping all the Kansas City teams on this great Tuesday morning. But last night, as I had mentioned on the podcast, I had the chance to do two post games, which is why we wanted the podcast episode out before the game. Then I had to do a quick hour-long Royals post game on 810, my day job. So if you're ever wondering why I'm getting episodes out later, it's because I do work during the day, and sometimes my schedule just doesn't line up to do a podcast at a good time. So to me, last night was quite a whirlwind. Go from watching an intense baseball game and watching an intense football game really until the final 5 minutes of the fourth quarter. But it was exhilarating. And Arrowhead Stadium found out the Royals had won, and you heard this crazy cheer amongst the bleachers, or chairs, I should probably call them. They're not bleachers because they're not metal. But the crowd certainly was enthusiastic when they found out the Royals had won. Patrick Mahomes wanted updates at halftime about the Royals and the Yankees. So it was an all-around great night. And, even though I was busy, it's still fun to be a part of that and root for two teams right now that are wildly successful. You got a football team that's undefeated. You got a baseball team that's now coming back for not one, but two playoff games at Kauffman Stadium against the New York Yankees. Let's start it off with what we saw last night. I love the fact that the game started off the way it did. And I sound crazy in saying that. I sound a little bit like a Yankees fan and saying that I love the start of that game. But, Carlos Rodon comes out. He strikes out the side. He's breathing fire. Yankee Stadium was much louder than it was in game one. And that place is just ready to collapse. They're ready for a quick 1-2-3 inning in the top of the first, and their offense to go out and put up 2 or 3 runs off Cole Reagans at the bottom of the first. But more than just Carlos Rodon shoving and Yankee Stadium being loud, Carlos Rodon was certainly feeling himself, right? He strikes out the side, and after each strikeout, he's kind of puffing out his chest. He's talking a little bit, saying, "It's on, boys," after he strikes out Bobby Witt Jr. And then after he strikes out Vinny Pasquantino. At the time, I thought I had caught it, but I didn't want to out the guy if that really wasn't what he was doing, because that's just in poor taste, right? I'm not going to make assumptions at what a player may be doing when he may not be doing that. But I thought I had caught with my eyes that Carlos Rodon had stuck his tongue out at the Royals dugout after striking out Vinny. And then he turns around and proceeds to yell toward his dugout. I mean, it was game on from that point. Rodon wasn't wrong. It's on, right? That was kind of the message. And that's why I loved the way the game started. You had that intensity. You had that fire. And then Cole Reagans comes out and walks the first 2 batters of the game. After a night in which The pitching staff had walked 8 total and was a big reason why the Royals lost 6-5. But Cole Ragans bounces back. He battles back. But even in the bottom of the first, another thing caught my eye. Juan Soto, who's known to do this, it's not like he has anything against Cole Ragans, but he walks off Ragans and he glares at him, stares him down in the same way Gunnar Henderson stared down Seth Lugo in Game 2 in Baltimore. Bat flips to the first base dugout, takes his base, and Cole Ragans made a mental note of that. And after everything kind of settled, right, there was no fireworks, there was no jawing back and forth. A lot of it was just, really facial expressions. Carlos Rodon sticking his tongue out, Juan Soto staring down Cole Ragans after the walk, Yankee Stadium's loud, it's out of control. It was great for postseason baseball, but the Royals just never really caved. They never crumbled in that spot. They fell behind 1-0 on a Giancarlo Stanton rope that Bobby Witt Jr. couldn't glove. But right after that, what did the Royals do? They responded with 4. Salvador Perez homers. Tommy Pham has a go-ahead RBI single. Garrett Hampson, who we're going to talk about in the second segment, has another hit, a 2-strike hit off Carlos Rodon. And all while this is happening, you started to realize that the tongue that was stuck out at the Royals dugout from Carlos Rodon, they made a mental note of that, because what did Salvador Perez do after tying the game? After he's rounding third base, he looks to the Royals dugout and sticks his tongue out and kind of shakes his head. I'm not going to do it on camera because that's too embarrassing for me, because I also didn't hit a 400-plus foot home run in a playoff game. So I'm not doing that as a podcaster here. But to me, that was why I love the start of the game so much. You have a guy that's amped up. He's fired up. He clearly felt like he was going to go the distance and dominate the Royals, and the Royals didn't take too kindly to that. So Salvador Perez makes a mental note. He homers off him. He had dominated Carlos Rodon in his career, and for some reason, Carlos Rodon hung a 2-0 slider to him with the ump cam on. I thought that was pretty sweet. I'm not a huge fan of the ump cam, but in a spot like that, the rarity that you get a home run on that very pitch, incredibly small chance, a small percentage chance of that happening. But he crushes it, tie game. And then Rodon doesn't even make it out of the 4th inning. He goes 3 2/3, and Garrett Hampson is the one that chases him. To me, that's the beauty of postseason baseball. If you're going to bring that flair and intensity, you risk the other team getting pissed off a little bit. And the Royals were clearly pissed off. They didn't really jaw back. They just sort of mocked him. And they mocked him and knocked him out of the game before the conclusion of the 4th inning. And that was an exciting part. Then you get back to that story between Ragans and Juan Soto. Ragans strikes out Juan Soto in his next at bat, and Cole Ragans is the one to stare him down, not letting Juan Soto intimidate him. So yes, they made a mental note of those little things. And going back to what Carlos Rodon said after his second strikeout to Bobby Witt Jr., it's on. And that's what the Royals felt as well. And though Ragans didn't go deep in this game, it felt like the bullpen was due for another big night, and they had one. Angel Serpa gets back up on the hump, and I'll tell you this. It's fitting the Chiefs were playing at the same time, because what Andy Reid does so well is he puts guys that struggled, had a drop pass, fumbled the ball. He puts the ball right back in their hands the very next drive. He's very good at that. I remember he did it countless times with McCole Hardman. He did it with Sky Moore before. He did it with Carson Steele this year. He's great at doing that. He puts faith back in their players because he doesn't want them thinking about that bad play for the rest of the game. Let's get that out of their mind. Go do something good. I'm going to give you this chance. Don't fumble again. Don't drop the ball again. You've got your opportunity to right some wrongs. And Matt Quatraro did the same thing with Angel Serpa. After not getting an out the night before, 2 nights ago, he puts him back out there, and he gets a double play ball to end an inning. He was much better, much sharper. Had a strikeout against Juan Soto, I believe it was, because Aaron Judge walked right after that. And then he gets the double play ball off Austin Wells. That's putting the guy back up on the horse and saying, I'm not letting you think about Saturday night. We need you in this playoff series. We need you to be confident. You weren't as confident on Saturday. Now he sure is confident going back to Kansas City for games 3 and 4. Then you get, in my opinion, the best outing of Kris Bubic's career. And it's recency bias. I'm being a prisoner of the moment. I understand that. But to me, Chris Bubic going not one but 2 innings, that was the difference in this game. It really was, because Lucas Erceg threw 28 pitches on Saturday night. Yes, it would be nice to throw him for 2 innings and throw another 30 because he had an extra day of rest. But to get 6 outs from Chris Bubic, that to me was the difference. And now Lucas Erceg will be fully rested for Wednesday and Thursday, and that's something you got to factor in as well. There's no off day in between the games in Kansas City. It's back-to-back. So you want Erceg to be able to throw both of those games. Therefore, you don't want him burned out in the first 2 games of the series. But Chris Bubic gets an incredible double play ball off Giancarlo Stanton in the 8th inning, which, by the way, I am a big fan of Bob Costas and what he does. I've not been a fan of what he's done in this series. I mean, there is just no life. There is no enthusiasm. There is no juice. And this is a great series. These are 2 teams that are playing well. It's competitive. And we haven't gotten one memorable call yet. You look at the Tigers and Guardians, Kerry Carpenter with the 3-run home run off Clase, great call. You look at the Padres and Dodgers, great calls. You look at the Phillies and the Mets, great calls. The Royals and the Yankees aren't getting it right now. There's no enthusiasm. I know a lot of people are saying it's Bob Costas and his, Yankees bias. But on that double play ball, I mean, go listen to the call. I'm thinking, man, that might be the most biased sounding call I've ever heard. Just sounding dejected after Bubic gets the double play ball off Stanton. Now, again, Bob Costas is a legend in sports media. I like a lot of what he does, but he's not doing that well in the booth for this series. Ken Darling, I actually haven't minded too much. I think he's been very fair. He's really bringing up some great points throughout this series. But Bubic gets 6 outs. That was huge for this game. And Lucas Erceg dances around danger, gives up the leadoff home run to Jazz Chisholm. And then John Birdie gets a 2-out single. And then first pitch to Gleyber Torres, who I was already thinking in that moment, I'm nervous about the short porch and right. 100 mile an hour on the fist. 100 inside corner on the fist. And Gleyber Torres can't do anything with that. He rolls it over to Bobby Witt Jr. Series tied up. They head back to Kansas City for their first playoff game at Kauffman Stadium since Johnny Cueto threw Game 2 of the World Series in 2015. A complete game against the New York Mets. Should be rocking. I'm going to be out there. Can't wait for this environment because I believe it's going to be one of the loudest games in Kauffman Stadium history. Hopefully Wednesday and Thursday, and hopefully both wins for the Royals, though that is getting kind of greedy to beat the Yankees 3 straight and eliminating them before they would be able to head back to Yankee Stadium for Game 5. So first things first, you got to take care of business. On Wednesday, it'll be Seth Lugo going up against Clark Schmidt. All right, we're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we're going to talk about Garrett Hampson, a guy who was constantly criticized in the regular season, is now showing up in the postseason. I'm going to tell you who he reminds me of. That's coming up on Locked On Royals. You are tuned into Locked On Royals and the Locked On Podcast Network. I'm your host, Jack Johnson, and you can find me on Twitter or X at JohnnyJ_15. Want to give a shout out to our first sponsor today in Booking.com. Booking.yeah. Explore those U.S. cities you've always secretly wanted to learn more about, with hotels, bed and breakfasts, vacation rentals, resorts, and so much more. On Booking.com, you can find your perfect stay even in your rival city during the postseason. I know a couple people that went out to Yankee Stadium, stayed in New York, looked like a lot of fun. I know it's a hostile environment, but anytime you can watch a baseball game in New York, that really is the top of the list for me. I would love to see an October baseball game in New York, and especially with the Royals playing there. I wasn't able to do it because of work this time around. But it's also, maybe you're looking to try the stadium cuisine there. Maybe you're already looking ahead to Detroit and Cleveland and trying out some food there. But just figure out everything when heading over to Booking.com, because they're going to have the right stay for you. And they can make you a fan of any city, even your rivals. So book today at Booking.com. Booking.yeah. I don't think it's any secret that Garrett Hampson was, I don't want to say public enemy number one. I led him with such, confidence there in saying, I don't think it's any secret, and then walked it back a little bit. But to me, if I had to put one player at the top of the list for Royals fans' frustrations and putting a lot of blame on one guy throughout the season, if I ran a tally, Garrett Hampson would have the most. I rarely comment on lineups that Matt Quatrero posts. Now in the postseason, it's a little bit different because it's a different beast. We're not talking about a Sunday lineup in May. We're talking about do or die games in October. So I rarely comment on them. And the way I looked at it was after April 10th, April 15th, I'm saying to myself, okay, if there's lefties on the mound, what's Matt Quatraro going to do? He's going to load up the lineup with righties. That means Dairon Blanco's getting at bats. That means Freddie Fermin is getting at bats. That means Garrett Hampson is getting at bats. And a lot of people just didn't like that idea. Every time that lineup came out and Garrett Hampson was in it, oh, I got a lot of comments. What is Matt Quatraro doing? He's trying to throw the season. He clearly doesn't care about winning. But this is what he's done all season long. And when I knew that Carlos Rodon was going to be a game 2 starter, I thought to myself, Garrett Hampson's going to play in this game. Now, he's not going to stay in it for all 9 innings. I believe that whenever Rodon is pulled, Garrett Hampson will be pulled for Kyle Isbell. Now, it was a little bit different last night, but Garrett Hampson started off that game, and he had the first good at-bat against Rodon. I know Michael Massey had singled in the second inning, but this was working the count, made Carlos Rodon throw a lot of pitches, 2-strike pitch, off speed, and Garrett Hampson ropes it into left center field. And remember, in game 1, he had 2 RBIs on a go-ahead single to give the Royals the lead 5-4. So he'd already come through in that series, and that was off of Tim Hill in game 1. So first at bat against Carlos Rodon, guides one into left center field. Now you got his legs at first base, and that's undeniable. He's a quick runner, maybe not the best base runner, but he's fast. One in the gap, one down the line. He's probably scoring. Then in his next at bat, after the Royals had taken the lead 2-1, Tommy Pham had a great 2-strike professional, at bat to right center field, just dropped one in there between Aaron Judge and Juan Soto. Garrett Hampson comes to the plate, and you're thinking, if you're Carlos Rodon, well, he might be a little bit tougher to strike out, so I'm not going to throw that same pitch there. But Garrett Hampson kind of ambushes him and puts one through the 5-6 hole and drives in the Royals' third run, and then comes around to score on Maikel Garcia's bloop single to right field. What I loved about last night, what I loved about game 1, what I've loved about this postseason so far is that it's kind of showcasing the guys that have been blamed for a lot of the season. MJ Melendez has had a pretty good postseason, in my opinion. Couple of good plays in left field. He homered in game 1, had a single in game 1, had a hit in game 2 in Baltimore, hit one really hard, hit one on the screws last night that John Birdie made an excellent play at first base to turn 2. But MJ's looked good. Hampson has looked good. And it's great to see that happening for them because those were guys that felt the criticism all season long. And I think you can go as far to say now, unless Garrett Hampson has the worst blunder of all blunders at some point in this postseason, or MJ Melendez, and I'll knock on wood, you can hear it right here, so that doesn't happen, he has earned the contract. He has earned the roster spot. When you now look back at Garrett Hampson, in my opinion, you'll think more fondly of him than what you remember in the regular season. And that goes to show you why the Royals never gave up on guys like him, never gave up on MJ Melendez. They have faith in their players. They have confidence. And does it always work out? It does not. There are times that they can cost you. MJ Melendez had the gaff in left field in game 1 in Baltimore. But he also came through in game 1. It wasn't a win, but he's playing well right now. Maikel Garcia, let's talk about him. This is 20 minutes into the show, and I feel bad I haven't even mentioned him yet. 4 for 5 at the top of the order. We were complaining, or I wasn't, but a lot of people were complaining about Hampson playing. Why is Maikel Garcia leading off? Maikel Garcia lives for moments like this in Yankee Stadium. 4 hits, all singles, stole a base, played great third base, and the Royals believed in him. Matt Quatraro believes in him. Paul Hoover, Alex Zumwalt, Keone Duren, Vance Wilson, Damon Hollins, they believe in those guys, and they felt like when October comes around, they're guys you're going to want to trust in certain spots. And now they've got that confidence. I feel great that some of the guys that really felt that harsh criticism throughout this season, they're coming through when it matters most now. Did anybody have Maikel Garcia having a 4-hit game at Yankee Stadium in the ALDS? I didn't. I'll admit that. Did anybody have Garrett Hampson starting 3 for 3 in the ALDS, getting on base every single time, having 3 RBIs? I didn't. Did you have MJ Melendez homering, having a multi-hit game in game 1 in Yankee Stadium of Garrett Cole? I didn't. Right? Angel Serpa being the first guy out of the pen in a lot of these postseason games. I didn't have that. That wasn't what I believed was going to happen. Did I have Bobby Witt Jr. going hitless and being a disaster at the plate in game 1, game 2? I did not. But that's the beauty of the postseason. And I'll leave you with this thought I have on Garrett Hampson. He reminds me a lot of Christian Colon. Christian Colon always came through when it mattered most. But Christian Colon never really felt that criticism that Garrett Hampson does. But what I can tell you about Garrett Hampson that gives him the upgrade over Christian Colon, he can play anywhere, and he plays great defense out in center field. The Royals have always loved that. And I thought Matt Quatraro handled it perfectly last night. Garrett Hampson went 2 for 2 when Rodon was pulled, and there finally was a righty on the mound. What happened? Kyle Isbell pinch hit for him, and he singled him that at bat. Now you got Kyle Isbell's defense in center field. That's the way it's going to happen in the playoffs. If there's a lefty on the bump, which I think Rodon would be due to start game 5, because I said yesterday Garrett Cole would start game 5. I believe they were saying last night in the broadcast Garrett Cole would start game 4 for the Yankees. So it's going to be Clarke Schmidt in game 3, Garrett Cole in game 4, and if there is a game 5, I think that lines it up to be Carlos Rodon. But Garrett Hampson, in my opinion, would start in that game until a righty would be on the mound, and then Kyle Isbell would come in. But I tip my cap to him. I tip my cap to Maikel Garcia, Angel Serpa, MJ Melendez, all these guys that have been criticized in the regular season, including at times by me. They were great last night. They've been great in the postseason, and that's cool to see for guys that were not getting a lot of the praise that the other guys on the team were, or were getting a pass like some other guys on the team were. They were great last night. Garcia, Garrett Hampson, Serpa, Melendez smoked one, but those other three, they were a big reason as to why the Royals even up the series and now head back to Kauffman Stadium, needing 2 wins to move on to the American League Championship Series. We're going to take our final break of the show. When we come back, let's look at the entire postseason and how fun it has been so far. That's coming up on Locked On Royals. You are tuned into Locked On Royals in the Locked On Podcast Network. I'm your host, Jack Johnson, and you can find me on Twitter or X at JohnnyJ_15. We got 2 sponsors that I want to give a shout out to, beginning with FanDuel. Hey, NFL fans, you can start the season with a big return on FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. You'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com. Now, I told you for last night's game to take the over on the strikeout total for Cole Ragans. I believe in that game, he got close to it. He didn't work deep into the game. He didn't have the best command last night, which is why he could only go 4 innings. But in that game, Cole Ragans struck out, looks like 5 guys. So it actually hit the under. I was wrong on it, so I apologize. Vegas clearly knows what's up. But I will tell you for game 3, I feel Bobby Witt Jr. is going to have the over on hit total. He's not going over for that long. Think he has a big game on Wednesday against the New York Yankees and Clarke Schmidt. The other sponsor I want to give a shout out to is Game Time. I've already bought my tickets. I use Game Time for Wednesday. If you're thinking about going or you're wanting to go on Thursday, I strongly suggest that you use Game Time for buying those tickets. You don't have any time to waste, though, because we're coming up on it, and those ticket prices are going to continue to rise. But if you download the Game Time app, they're going to tell you when those prices are going up, when the tickets are running out, the best deals, the cheapest deals, however you want to go about it. Game Time is going to have you covered there. And I love using it because I don't have to wait around for my tickets. My tickets are put right into my MLB Ballpark app shortly after I buy them. I add them to my Apple Wallet, and I'm good to go. And I'm all set for tomorrow because I used Game Time. And with Game Time, all you got to do is download that app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off on your first purchase. Those terms apply. So again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off. Download the Game Time app. What time is it? It is game time. Well, I've had a blast so far, not just watching the Royals in October, but every game in October. And I had a buddy who, hasn't been watching postseason baseball for a long time, really since 2014 and 15. And he's just not the biggest of baseball fans. But when the Royals were in it in 14 and 15, he was really invested. He wanted to watch every game. It wasn't just the Royals. It would be the Blue Jays and the Rangers. It would be the Cubs and the Mets. it would be the Astros and the Yankees. Whatever time that game was, he wanted to make a plan for it. But after the Royals were out of it, he just didn't feel the need to watch those games. If it was the World Series, he, of course, would turn it on. But overall, it was, okay, I don't care about any of these games because it doesn't impact my team, the Royals. The Royals are out of it. I don't really care anymore. And, if you're a baseball fan, you'll continuously watch him, but it is a different feel. And I think this goes for any sport, NCAA tournament, NFL playoffs, NBA playoffs, college football playoffs. When you're not in it, you may not have that same intensity watching it because it doesn't matter for your team. Maybe you're just a sports fan in general and you're going to watch it anyway. But to me, it's been this different feel again, watching playoff baseball because the Royals are in it. You're curious about what happens with Detroit and Cleveland. You're excited for the games today between the Phillies and the Mets and Dodgers and Padres. And more importantly, I think it's great that in this postseason the Royals are in, where there's 3 American League Central teams in the Final 4 on the American League side. It would be easy for a lot of MLB fans to fall into what they did last year, which even though there was some great upsets, the Arizona Diamondbacks having their underdog story, the Rangers having their underdog story, though they had an incredibly high payroll, fans weren't as pleased because they felt like it was a boring postseason. Right, the Rangers and Astros series was great, but then Game 6 and Game 7 were blowouts. They weren't close. These have been exhilarating, ninth inning comeback, thrilling matchups, a lot of intensity, frustrations and venom, flaring up in the Dodgers and Padres series. Right? You're paying attention to all of that. And for baseball fans, you love the fact that every single series is tied up at 1 apiece. You're going back to Kauffman Stadium, 1-1. They're headed to Detroit, 1-1. You look at the Phillies and the Mets, they're going to be at Citi Field today. It's 1-1, first pitch 4:08. And Dodgers and Padres head to San Diego. That's going to be a phenomenal atmosphere. 8:08. This is great for baseball, a sport that constantly struggles with promoting itself, for bringing in the average fan, for bringing in fans that don't watch baseball. This is what it's all about. I'm not trying to say that just because the Royals are in it. You've got great matchups on the National League side, and you've got competitive ones on the American League side. If the Yankees steamrolled the Royals, I think people would be very bored with what's going on in the American League side. But the fact the Tigers have had this incredible run, now we get postseason baseball back in Detroit and Kansas City later on this week. You feel juiced up about that. It's going to be a great atmosphere. And you've got so many moments so far of go-ahead home runs. I mean, you saw what happened in Milwaukee with the Mets. Pete Alonso, the go-ahead home run. Yesterday, Kerry Carpenter, the go-ahead 3-run home run off Clase. Padres and Dodgers. You had the tempers flaring. I can't believe I said angers flaring. We might make up a term ourselves. But tempers flaring, right? There's venom now in that series. Fans throwing stuff at Fernando Tatis. It was a blowout in Game 2, but it was fun in Game 1. There's so much going on in the postseason, and it grips the average fan. And to be a part of that, you love to hear it. I mean, selfishly, I'm glad that it happened when the Royals got back into the postseason. I mean, last year, so many fans complained about that World Series matchup. It was boring. Rangers, Diamondbacks, it wasn't really close. There was a walk-off home run in Game 1, and still, not everybody loved the matchup. They wanted to see the Phillies and they wanted to see the Dodgers there. Maybe just the average fan did. Not everybody roots for the big market teams, but you love those matchups. And there's still going to be fans out there that want the Subway Series, Mets and Yankees in the World Series. They're going to want Dodgers or Padres in the World Series. And that's going to be an exciting element to it. So to me, I love the fact that postseason baseball has been so exhilarating so far. The Royals have been a part of it. They've had one of the more fun series in the divisional round. And now they're going to head back to Kauffman Stadium for hopefully some exciting and just goosebump type of baseball on Wednesday and Thursday against the New York Yankees. Well, that's going to do it for us on Locked On Royals and the Locked On Podcast Network. I've been your host, Jack Johnson. Thank you for making Locked On Royals your first listen today. For your second listen, find Locked On MLB. Baseball Guru Soli brings a daily blend of humor and baseball, keeping you updated on every aspect of the playoff picture. Find Locked On MLB on YouTube or wherever you listen to your podcast. Tomorrow, we're going to have a recap after the game. It's going to be a little bit later because I'll be actually out at Kauffman Stadium, so expect it maybe around 10, 11, 12 o'clock for a recap of that game. And we'll preview the Thursday matchup between the Royals and the Yankees. But until then, you take it easy, Kansas City.